Okay, and this is, as I said, overview. So a bit about evolution and different topics in biology, and a little bit about scientific method that you probably learned way before you took this course. What is scientific method? And this is a cute mouse. And the next slide pretty much like how is this mouse relevant to biology? And it looks like, again, biology is a study of life, right? Living organisms. And living organisms don't live in isolation, right? So they interact with environment, they interact with each other, right? And from looking, for example, at this mouse, you can actually refer to, for example, evolution. Evolution means why they both mice, beach mouse and inland mouse, they're both mice, but why they different? What happened? So how environment that they live in actually affected the appearance, right? Why they don't look alike, both mice, right? Organization, what this mouse is made of? Okay, so entire organism mouse made of organ systems made of organs made of tissues made of cells. Tissue is actually a group of cells with the same structure and function. And cells are made of large molecules and small molecules, right? So this is about organization. You look at the mouse and you think, what contributes to different looks? And you can actually say genetic information, different genes activated in two different strains of them, right? So for brown fur and gene for white fur, or maybe some like other differences like ear shape. So genetic material. Flow of energy. You probably learned, right? You probably learned how energy is transferred, like the cycling of matter, flow of energy from sun to plants, from plants to those who eat plants, from those that eat plants, and so on, right? And interactions, so interactions like, within their community, right? How they interact and how they interact with their predators and how they interact with their, the environment as well, okay? So this again, different fields in biology that you can look at something called reductionist approach when you look at their level of molecules or cells, or you can look at something much more general like ecology, right? That studies ecosystems where living organisms live, okay? And I said, biology is study of life. Bio is life, logos means study. And as you're gonna see, there's so many different things in biology. Animations. I'm gonna skip the animation. I'll leave it for you. And so, again, as an illustration with the mouse, in biology, there's different themes or topics. Organization, information, energy, matter, interactions, and evolution. I should say probably organization is one of the oldest. Evolution is, the way again evolution is approached in these days is probably one of the latest. While these are kind of in between, probably information, genetics is also relatively new field. New field, I mean, like 100-something years old. Okay, so What is this about? What we talk about again in bio is order, right? How things are organized from simple to complex or vice versa. From molecules to cells to tissues to organs, entire organism. Evolutionary adaptations. Evolutionary adaptations, organisms interact with the environment and use different approaches how to benefit. So one of the ways is like what you can see, it's camouflage. Camouflage, hiding from predators, like blending with the environment so predators won't actually prey on you. One of the ways, one of the illustrations of evolutionary adaptations. Regulation. Ears are used for what? Who can tell me? What is ears are for?
Maybe for like temperature, control the temperature or something in body.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. First of all, the skin is very thin and blood vessels are large, right? So when the blood flows through the ears, like water from their blood evaporates, right? And cools off. Basically, water, once it evaporates, it takes away the heat energy. This like really big ears, but many other animals use ears as well, even though they're smaller. Actually, in mice, it's pretty much the same thing. Energy processing. So butterfly feeds on nectar, right? Nectar is a sweet fluid produced by plants. And plants produce nectar. Anyone can tell me why plants make nectar?
Reproduce? Isn't it a form of reproduction? Or no?
No. I mean, actually, indirectly, yes. I should say yes, Marius. They produce nectar, so insects will visit. And when insects visit, right, the pollen,
To the nether.
yes, gets stuck to their legs or wings or whatever, right? And they can actually do the pollination, like from one flower to another one. Flower is a reproductive organ of the plant, right? So pollen, actually, you know what's pollen? Pollen is a sperm, actually, of the flower, yes. And they carry this sperm to fertilize other flowers. Okay, growth and development. And there are different approaches actually to growth and development. If you look at the plant world, right? So not all plants, but majority, they produce something called a seed, right? Seed is an embryo. We benefit from seeds, right? So basically you can say like when you eat seeds, you eat plants embryos. Ew, yeah. But because the embryos, they have so many nutrients, right? So for the embryo to develop, basic plants don't do this for us. They do this for their own reproduction, right? But again, within the seed, there are enough nutrients for the embryo to grow and develop, right? Not all of them make it, right? If you drop an acorn, not necessarily gonna get an oak tree, right? But still, there is a potential. Response to the environment. So in terms of response to the environment, anyone familiar with this plant?
That's a fly dropper, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Which means these plants are what?
They're carnivorous.
Uh-huh. Yes, very good. They're carnivores, right? Why they carnivores? They carnivores, yes, yes, Devon.
They eat insects, which makes them carnivores because they're meat, basically.
Yes, but what made them carnivores?
Oh,
Why such an adaptation?
I don't know.
Can anyone tell me? The thing is that their soil where these plants live lacks nitrogen. So plants can trap nitrogen from the air, even though there's plenty of nitrogen in the air, but it's a gas. Plants can't trap it. So normally they get it from the soil, but if there's no nitrogen in the soil, they have to get it from somewhere else. So from insects, right? Normally plants make their own food, right? They make their own food through a process called
Photosynthesis.
photosynthesis. Absolutely, yes, photosynthesis. So now when photosynthesis is not enough, they have to turn to other resources, right? Like this insects. Reproduction. I mean, you can be a living organism without reproducing, right? Not all living organisms capable of reproduction. I think a good example of organisms that are not capable of reproduction are among insects, especially those that live in colonies, right? I think good example, you know what, let me just show you. Beehive numbers. Come on, what did I get? Beehive. Okay, so can you see it, right? In the beehive. And it's, again, it's applicable to many others, those that are like, how to say, as I said, they live in groups and they interact within the groups. So this is a queen. So the queen is the one who does what?
Makes the rest of the clan or the workers.
Yes, she lays the eggs, right? These are the guys, right? Guys are called the drones. Do they make honey?
No.
No.
No. What they do?
Protect.
They take care of the queen, right? So the queen will keep laying eggs. These are the workers. They are going out, right? Collecting pollen, whatever, to make the honey. They are sterile. They can't lay eggs. It's only for the queen, right? If you look at their ants, if you look at the termites, it's pretty much the same. But they live in organisms, right? They're bees. So as I said, reproduction is not always, it's not something that is given, right? So yes, majority of organisms able to reproduce. The best in terms of reproduction are the germs. Germs reproduce at a very, very high rate, right? While, for example, giraffes, what do you think? How often a female giraffe gives birth?
I'm guessing only a few times, so like once or twice in its lifetime.
Yeah, not that often. Actually, the best may be like once in like 5 years. Yeah, and have you heard that when she gives birth to the baby giraffe, this poor baby drops like 5 feet down, you know, with the head down and hits the rocks because that's how she gives birth. So if you survive the fall, you're good. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Can you hear, guys? No, you can't. That's the thing. What's really interesting about seahorses Anyone knows something really amazing about them?
The male is pregnant.
Yes, that the male doesn't lay eggs, right? So female produces eggs, yes. Male fertilizes them, put them in his pouch, right? And carries the eggs before the babies hatch. Okay, so let's take a look at this. And this is, again, biological levels of organization. Something, again, you'll see in every single course in biology. You see this in anatomy. It's usually also introduction in anatomy as well. So we start from biosphere. So biosphere is the whole planet Earth, right? The land, the oceans, ecosystems. Ecosystems is a particular organization in terms of environment. So it includes the plants, the animals, their fungi, microorganisms. It's pretty much affected by climate as well. So this is the ecosystem. So there are different ecosystems in this world, right? For example, desert is one ecosystem. Ocean is another ecosystem, yes. Tundra is another ecosystem. What do you have in each ecosystem? You have communities. Communities means like different living organisms present in their ecosystem. Flowers, deers, whatever. Populations. So populations is particular specific type of either again plants or animals, right? Communities, again, groups. Population, one group, right? So you can look at this flower as an organism, right? By the way, leaves are considered organs, right? Organs of the plant. So this is what you can see actually with the naked eye. To see the tissues, you already need a microscope, right? So you pick up a microscope, you make a preparation, and you see the tissues because regular microscopes don't really allow you to see individual cells. I mean, like not really, I mean, not details. So this is cells, and then you have parts of the cells. They're called organelles. Organelles like organs of the cell that perform different duties, like feeding, waste disposal, protection, synthesis. So these are organelles. Organelles made of molecules. It's like macromolecules, large molecules, or small molecules, simple molecules. Okay. So I should say we spend with you like pretty much here. Like we start with the molecules, we move to the cells, and we're going to talk about different aspects of life, like plants, animals, energy, evolution. Okay. What is this? Emergent properties is basically how parts of the plant actually interact to help the plant to survive, right? So like why you need roots, why you need stems, why do you need leaves, right? So roots pretty much to pick up water nutrients from the soil. Stems is a transportation system to deliver this to the organs like leaves. Leaves participate in photosynthesis, making the plant's own food. Flowers used for reproduction. Okay, so these are emergent properties of living organisms. And let's talk about their structure and function. So this is who?
A hummingbird.
Yes, it's a hummingbird. What's really special about hummingbirds? You can tell me.
The way that they move their wings.
Exactly. Yes, so first of all, they are tiny, right? So they are of the smallest birds. What's really special about them, again, the wings. So the structure, like the shoulder joint, allows the wings to move not only to the front, but backwards as well, which allows them to move in both directions and also to hover, right? And what's also special about hummingbirds that they don't rest. They're constantly in motion, right? So what's basically this slide shows you that structure reflects function, right? Structures, functions, they evolved. And let me show you something else. Have you seen these guys before? They're birds. Come on. Okay, so tell me one thing. What's actually in common between birds and dinosaurs?
The birds can fly.
Yes, Gabriel.
The birds can fly, I think.
And dinosaurs too.
I think from what I
I
saw,
think they share a common ancestor.
Absolutely. It's actually believed in these days that birds are descendants of dinosaurs, right? So it is believed that dinosaurs were reptiles. So all reptiles evolved from dinosaurs. But then this idea was changed, right? And it's said that like dinosaurs, they already had feathers, right? Those who went extinct. By the way, anyone can tell me, let me stop sharing here. I want to look at you. Okay, so guys, what actually, what happened to dinosaurs? Why did they go extinct?
Didn't a meteor crash into the Earth and wipe out the population? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. What also helped basically is that once meteor, as you said, crashed, right? It's created like huge amount of dust and change in temperature on Earth that dinosaurs basically couldn't breathe, and their eggs were affected by the change in the temperature as well. But at that time, there was a group of mammals, right, that were able to seize the opportunity, right? Seize the moment, yes? Anyone here who likes one of my favorite movies, kids movies, is Coco. Anyone here who likes Coco? Did you watch Coco? Yes, it's like there's like seize the moment. So, I remember from that one. Yes, so what mammals did, they seized the moment. And that was definitely the beginning of dinosaurs' demise, right? But it's believed that at that time, some dinosaurs were kind of like in transitioning into birds, right? And when dinosaurs went extinct, actually, their descendants, one of the descendants were these bear birds. And let me tell you something really mind-blowing, that bear birds, specifically, I think the one that I showed you, lived in North America. Okay. Unfortunately, it went into extinction very, very soon. Why? What happened? And the story goes, 5 million years ago, something that is hard to explain happened. Animals that live in South America and animals that live in North America started to migrate. So those from north went down to south, those who went south went to north. Again, hard to explain what happened, why they decided to do this migration. Now, at that time, 5 million years ago, can you believe in Northern America lived elephants and camels? So they went down and didn't survive in South America. Birds went to the north, but at that time in North America, they had wolves, big population of wolves. And wolves really rejoiced when they saw the stare birds, said, yeah, food arrived. The stare birds, even though they had huge beaks, they were kind of like helpless against the wolves, wolf packs that pretty much like tore them apart. So that's the end of the story of the terror birds. Let me just continue into sharing. Guys, I'm really happy that none of you told me that this is impossible. Camels never lived in North America. You don't think so, right? No, tell me. Do you believe camels live in North America?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, they did actually, because some people they think, no, it's like elephants. But listen, lions lived in Europe, and not that long time ago. Lions lived in Europe a couple of thousand years ago. What happened to lions?
They migrated too.
They were hunted out, pretty much. You know, there were different heroes who actually fancied hunting and hunted poor lions. Oh, okay. So let me go back to, this is a terror bird. So I think there's a lot of resemblance with the dinosaur, right? We talked about adaptations, right? So they were powerful, they were very powerful predators, but once you move to a new area, there's already some balance in the system that you might actually become vulnerable, even if you're well equipped, like equipped with a beak and whatever. Okay, so cell, we're gonna spend a decent amount of time on cell, right? So what is special about the cell? Cell is a basic unit of life, okay? And it's enough to be made of only one cell, to be considered a living organism, okay? And one cell is enough to carry out life function. Now, majority of living organisms in this world are actually made of one cell. Like who? Can you give me an example?
Microorganisms,
What?
like the microorganisms.
Exactly like who?
Bacteria.
Bacteria, absolutely. Bacteria, single-celled organisms, and these are, I should say, the most successful organisms. What does mean successful? Successful is quantity. The largest number of living organisms in this world goes to bacteria, okay? So there's a cell theory which says that all living organisms are made from cells, one cell or many cells. And cell developed as an independent unit, which means it has a membrane that encloses, protects, and separates the cell contents from the environment. So there are two forms of cell, basically. You probably learned that before. Prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Guys, I'm gonna talk about this, but for a second. Everybody is familiar with what is prokaryotic or eukaryotic, or you should elaborate more on that?
I think so.
Yes? Yes, 1, yes, 2,
Yes.
yes, 3. So karyote means nucleus, right? Nucleus is the part of the cell where genetic material is stored, right? So eukaryotic means it has a nucleus and the organelles within the cell have also membranes. Prokaryotic cells, much smaller, much smaller, and it's more simple in organization, doesn't have nucleus and has limited amount of organelles. So this is eukaryotic cell, so this is the plasma membrane. This is a large nucleus. Nucleus is usually large because that's what genetic material is. The more complex organism, the more genetic material actually it stores, right? Genetic material is the most precious cargo inside a cell. It has to be protected. And like basically molecules have a limited access into the nucleus. That's why it has its own membrane, right? Prokaryotic cell, you see it's a tiny cell. For single-celled organism, you don't need that many genes. Not that many genes, they don't really need additional structure to protect them, right? So it's believed that life started as a prokaryotic, that over billions of years and eons, eventually became more advanced. In terms of eukaryotic cells, we usually differentiate animal cell and plant cell, okay? So now, genetic material is made of non-complex molecule we call DNA or desoxyribonucleic acid, right? So DNA usually forms something, how to say, more organized structures, which includes DNA molecule, like core DNA molecule and certain proteins. And they're organized into structures called chromosomes, right? So chromosomes, they are found in their nucleus, in the eukaryotic cell, or like floating inside the prokaryotic cell. Usually when the cell divides, when the cell goes into division, what you can see in this process of mitosis, you can see how genetic material separates among two new cells. Basically, the whole process, the whole idea of cell division and reproduction is pretty much all about transferring genetic material properly, okay? How many chromosomes do we have?
23.
23,
46.
46, 23 pairs. You were very close, Will. Yes, 46 or 23 pairs, right? Half of genetic material you got from each parent, right? Right? 50% from mother, half from mother, half from father. Now, who can tell me how much genetic material you share with your siblings, with your brothers and sisters? What do you think?
It depends, right? Or no?
On what?
Like you can come up with different genetic makeup of your siblings, I think.
What?
You can't like come up with different genetic variation in your siblings, I think.
But no, my question is, yeah, like, yes, definitely. But the question is up to how many, up to how much you share with your siblings? Like 50%, 25%, 12.5%.
25?
25.
Yes.
Siblings is up to 50%. So basically, if your parent is definitely half, right? For sure. From your mother, you got 50% of your genes. With your siblings, you can share the most 50% and at least like something like 40%. Okay, so there's a variation actually. That's why you might actually look alike with one of your brothers and sisters and not much alike with another one, right? Yeah.
Is that the same for twins?
Fraternal twins, absolutely the same, 50%, up to 50%. Identical twins, it's 100%, right? Okay, so now what are chromosomes about? So chromosomes, one more time, it's just a long DNA molecule, highly organized, and chromosomes carry genes. I really want you to pay attention here. We talk about this more. Gene is a unit of inheritance, right? So genes, that's what you receive from your parents, and that's what you transfer to your offspring, right? What is a gene about? Gene is about structure and function, right? It keeps information about what makes up the organism and how the organism basically functions, right? So, and genetic material is different. It's actually, humans share a lot of genetic material together. So just two random humans share more than 99% of genes. It's just 1% that can actually make a difference between us, right? And surprisingly, we share quite a lot with a mouse. What do you think? How much genetic material we share with a mouse? How close you are to the mouse, guys?
Like 40%, 45?
More. We share
80%.
70-something% we share with mouse. We both mammals, come on. Okay, guys, this is a sound, let me just check. Okay, sorry, guys, animation's on you, okay? Because again, the sound not gonna work well, and that's what I was talking about. Parents, right? Egg cell from mother, sperm cell from father, they join genetic material, right? And if everything works, right? So the interaction between parental genes goes well, right? Sound like magic, and this cell goes into division, and this is initial state of development. I won't even call it an embryo yet, actually. No, it's not even an embryo. It's just a bunch of cells that have a potential to become an embryo and then fetus. And then here you go, you have a baby that shares genetic material with the parents, right? And what is DNA about? We'll talk about biochemistry. We'll definitely talk more about nucleotides, what's their structure, but if you have some, I hope you have some background. This is a molecule called DNA, double helix or twisted ladder, right? So DNA molecule has two strands, right? It's not a single long chain. No, there are two chains that actually wind over each other and they connect it. So there are chemical bonds that actually keep these two strands together. Each strand made of nucleotides, and there are only 4 of them. A stands for adenine, C stands for cytosine, T stands for thymine, and G stands for guanine, right? Anyone remembers? T goes with, if in one strand you have T, in another strand you have A. Absolutely. In one strand you have C.
Yeah, G.
G. You can see they match, right? So G matches with C and A matches with T. That is called a complementary rule, that how they pair actually. So if you know one strand, you know how to build a second strand. So as I said, genetics is a relatively new science with all this breakthrough actually in discovering DNA or structure RNA. We'll talk more about RNA. I don't really want to go into this, but there's something that you're probably familiar with called gene expression. Can anyone please elaborate? What is gene expression? Okay, let me have a different approach. Did anyone here get a genetic testing? You know, it's like kind of popular, Ancestry, 23andMe.
I
Anyone
have
here? Yeah. So which one did you use?
the 23andMe.
May I ask you, like, why did you get interested?
Mainly because I'm like the lightest person in my family, and I just wanted to know what my ancestral background was. So,
Okay,
curiosity.
that's how like many people actually, yes, that's what many people are interested in. Okay, so now, how it's relevant to gene expression? The thing is that basically, like your DNA is like a huge like blueprint, right? It's a blueprint. Now, you have 40,000 genes, and approximately 20 to 25% of these genes don't do anything. They're just there, right? But there are genes that, for example, like you can see, define your eye color, define your hair color, define your height, like something we call the trait, right? Which contribute to your looks. If you actually identify gene behind this looks, say this gene is expressed, right? Which means it's an active gene. Like, for example, gene that is responsible for hemoglobin synthesis, which is an important protein in your red blood cells, it's constantly expressed, right? But some genes are silent. It doesn't mean they're going to be silent forever. Nobody knows exactly why some genes get expressed and some genes are suppressed, right? What happens when this expression-suppression switches. But it's like if you see, for example, if you have a gray cat, right? And you have a kitten with a gray fur, you say, oh, the gene for the gray fur is expressed. You see the looks, right? Okay. Now, expression, genetic expression is pretty much what's responsible for different organs, right? Genes expressed in your neurons might not be expressed in your muscle cells, right? Genes expressed in your muscle cells might not be expressed in your skin cells. Every single cell in your body has the same genetic material, but you have different organs, you have different structures, which means different genes behind them, right? One more time, we don't know how it happens. Exactly. I think there's a lot of information already accumulated, but still, you can't say what makes neuron and bone cell as a bone cell, okay? But you can see crystalline lens, it's in your eye, and this lens helps you to read. You need it to focus on something, on objects that are close to you. And this is an interesting material, very interesting material, absolutely clear, so the light can go through the lens, like any lens, like lens in your glasses, right? Why so? Because it expresses, produces special protein called crystalline. By the way, if crystalline gets dark, the person has a condition called when the lens in the eye gets cloudy, dark.
Cataract, I think.
Cataract. This is cataract. When the light can't pass through the lens, the vision becomes blurry, 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 and people's eyes, the person's eyes get like whitish. Have you ever seen that? Cataracts. Okay. Now, all genetic material that you have is called a genome. It's like a library. Again, you carry this library with you and you don't know how this book is read, like again, in different organs. So genomics is basically studying, again, similarity in genetic material between different species. And proteomics That's about proteins, pretty much. Because pretty much gene is responsible for protein synthesis, something we'll talk about a lot, about protein synthesis, right? And genes behind proteins. So proteome, unlike a genome is actually a set of proteins produced, expressed by particular cells. And bioinformatics is a very popular field in these days. It's actually computational biology, which actually navigates all the data, all the information that already gathered, already available, but not somehow, I mean, it's not like organized, but it's, you know, like in most of the pharmaceutical companies, they have bioinformatics departments that actually deal with their, like looking for organizing biological data. Okay, so let me take a look. We already, still on slide 30. Oh my gosh. And this is, let me see. Okay, guys, give me like 5 more minutes. I'll talk about the energy and we'll take a break, okay? Okay, so again, this is like overview. This is very, very general. And again, you, I should say quite familiar. Energy flow, right? So energy flow, we all depend on sun, right? Because the light energy could be trapped, right, by plants that can use light energy and carbon dioxide to produce food, right, and oxygen. So different organisms feed on plants, right? They use this trapped energy from sun to live, right? Chemical energy. Other organisms can eat them, right? Organisms that feed on plants release heat, release carbon dioxide that could be reused for photosynthesis, right? Once plant dies and caterpillar dies, right? The decomposers that can break down organic material into simple forms that usually goes into soil and provides chemicals that plants can use to grow. So this is like, in few words, how energy flows. Are you familiar with this? Do you need more elaboration? Okay. And we can do this. Okay. So just this one and break. Okay. So this is something called feedback system, feedback regulation, which is usually present in living organisms. And feedback regulation is basically to keep balance. It's related to something called homeostasis. Homeostasis means internal balance. If you look, for example, humans, we keep internal balance of fluids, internal balance of glucose, internal balance of, like we keep temperature stable as well. And it's usually the system works that once balance is disrupted, the feedback regulation restores it back. And this is example for us humans that your sugar levels, your glucose levels in blood should be within particular range, right? Whenever after meal, your glucose levels go up, hormone called insulin is released by pancreas and basically removes sugar from the blood into the cells, right? Lowering levels of glucose in blood. If glucose levels drop, the same feedback regulation, another hormone called glucagon is released. Glucagon releases basically releases glucose from storage, restoring the balance. Diseases, most of the diseases happen from disruption of homeostasis. If, for example, this homeostasis is disrupted, this particular one with insulin and glucose, this condition is called
Diabetes.
diabetes. One of there, it's called metabolic disease, and this is one of the toughest disease to handle, the diabetes, right? It's very tough. It's a very tough disease, and this is actually a good example of how homeostasis could be disrupted. Okay, and okay. Okay, so right now it's 9:15, so 9:25, okay? I'll see you back and we'll continue. Okay, guys?
All right.
10 minutes break,
Okay.
okay? Recording. And back to, oops, this is your attendance actually. Evolution. Okay, so first of all, evolution is kind of like a tricky topic because some people accept it, some people don't accept it. I mean, I believe it's your personal choice, like what you really believe in, but you know, even great believers, they actually were quite curious about evolution theory. So I don't really think that one really excludes another. So like you see, I'm not sure who this guy, Theodosius Dobzhansky, said nothing biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. I mean, fair enough to me. And actually, I think one of the reasons evolution theory was developed is from the approach of classifying and identifying new species. So once you start actually organizing information about living organisms, about species, you start asking a lot of questions. You ask question, why, for example, lions in Africa share so much with their Asian tigers and with mountain lions in North America? Ask question, why zebras and horses similar, even though they live far away from each other, right? They're also quite interesting to learn about us, Homo sapiens. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And where actually we stand in terms of living organisms on Earth, right? And there is a long history of species on Earth that change over time. And that's pretty much what is evolution about. Evolution is about changes in populations of living organisms. So organisms that lived a long time ago, like dinosaurs, don't exist here anymore. Organisms that live like a few billions of years ago have nothing to do. They don't even look like, not even close to what we have now, right? So that's, one more time, was the reason why let's push into development of evolution theory. And talking about what we know in these days, the approach of classifying organisms is, it's something relatively new, 3 domains. 3 domains approach is maybe like 30 years. When I was a student, we actually didn't talk about that yet. So domains are called bacteria, archaea, and eukarya, okay? A long time ago, bacteria and archaea were considered like one group, one domain, but actually that was changed. Eukarya is, again, organisms that their cell have eukaryotic cells. with the nucleus and membrane enclosed organelles. Eukarya includes plants, fungi, animals, and protists. Protists are single cell organisms, but the cellular organization pretty much matches of plants and animals. Protists actually is a group that is very hard to classify, super hard to classify, because there's so many different, variations in terms of genes, in terms of structure, right? You see some related to plants, some related to animals, some related to fungi, some not related to anything at all, right? You just put them into this group, kind of like, like dump container, just say, okay, protists, whatever. Bacteria is also a very diverse group, because there's some bacteria that are photosynthetic, right? That makes them also close to plants. Some behave pretty much like animals, right? The reason why they were separated, bacteria and archaea, even though they resemble each other, is that it was found that genetically they're very different. And it's actually archaea somehow probably closer to us than bacteria. And this is eukarya, plants, fungi, animals, and protists. And unity, basically the unity is definitely DNA and proteins. Nothing else can unite living organisms more, right? And that's what I told you. We share a lot with the mouse. We definitely share less with plants, but there's still some DNA that we share with all living organisms. And what is this about? Like, that's basically a nice example. You see, paramecium. This is really sad that you won't be able to go to the lab and see paramecium yourself under the microscope. It's like, I remember how much fun we had with students actually with paramecium. But you see, paramecium lives in the pond, right? And has tiny hairs that sweep and help paramecium to move. If you look at our airways, cells that line our airways, they also have cilia, very much like paramecium, and they also do sweeping motion, right? So one, can say like, come on, can't even see this paramecium. Who knows about paramecium? But, somebody can be surprised actually about what is, what is there for both of us. This is a famous skeleton. Anyone knows the name of that lady? Guys, have you heard about Lucy? Anyone who's actually kind of fan of human evolution? Would like to
I
learn-
heard about Lucy before.
Yes, please. Can you
She's
share
like
with us?
I think she's like our common ancestor, I think. But I saw a documentary about her on YouTube.
Do you remember why she was called Lucy?
I don't.
Okay, the story goes that there was a group of paleontologists, right, who were digging somewhere in the southern Africa. Couldn't find anything. And then one guy was walking and he tripped, right, and fell over something. And something were bones kind of like exposed. And basically they were digging, but Lucy was kind of, they didn't really have to dig much. She was,
small, yeah, I don't want to be part of this.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry. I'll move. Give me 1 second. Let me see. I tried my best to share my office with my husband, but sorry, I have to move. We used to have, office together, but then I realized, you know, I can't teach if he's having a meeting on his Zoom. So, but usually, because again, we start like early at 8 and he doesn't start later than 9:30. So I have like some quiet time for myself for a while. Okay, so Lucy, yes, yeah, and they realized that there was quite on surface, right? And they had a party, and they played the Beatles song, "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." So that's how they called her Lucy. I think she visited New York a couple of years ago. She was displayed in Times Square Discovery Museum. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to see her there, but anyways, human evolution, again, it's a topic for itself, and there's so much to think about. I mean, not to steal you with, right? There's no unifying theory. A lot of things, a lot of opinions, views were challenged dramatically about human evolution. But there is a lot of cool stuff to learn. So the father of evolution is Charles Darwin, even though he never actually introduced term evolution. He never operated with this word. He called it descent with modification. Descent with modification, like changes in the offspring, right? Deviations from their common ancestor. By the time that he came up with his famous book, The Origin of Species, in 1859, there was a lot of evidence already gathered. A lot of, I should say, at his time, paleontology was definitely on the rise. They did a lot of digging actually in England, in the southern England, where, you know, like there's area where a lot of prehistoric animals somehow were preserved as fossils, and a lot of fossils were identified at that time. So his, his quest, his research didn't come from scratch, as I said. He built it on something already. Darwin, yes, this guy, who actually, quite a character, I should say. Anyways, he wanted to be a physician, but then he realized that he couldn't stand blood and human suffering. So he didn't know what to do. He decided to become a minister. But in Oxford, where he went, he got really taken into a club that was actually into biology. After he graduated, he still had his interest, but he didn't know how to apply it. He couldn't find a job as well. So he was invited to become part of the crew of a famous ship called the Beagle that toured the southern hemisphere, right? So he gladly joined, just to discover that he had horrible motion sickness, horrible. He suffered for days, you know, throwing up in his room. But when the ship was actually anchored, he was able to collect information, and not only collect, he actually was really good in analyzing it. And that's how he came with the famous, you can take a look at this. So he reached Galapagos Islands, which are near, they're part of Ecuador, right? Galapagos Islands, I think they're part of Ecuador. And his famous notes about the finches, right? So what about finches? Yes, this Galapagos finches. So ancestral finch, and if you look at the beaks of finches on different islands, right? If different island is a different ecosystem, right? A different ecosystem, they actually feed on different things. So there are those that are insect eaters, fruit eaters, again, insect eaters, cactus eaters, seed eaters. And the shape of finch pretty much matched that died, right? And thus he said, wow, these all guys are related. They're related to each other. They're different species. Species means they can't interbreed, right? So even though they look alike, they don't breed. So different species, but what happened? So that's how he came up with the descent with modification. So those who moved from the land into the islands, right, they had to adapt to the environment. And that's how he came with the idea of natural selection. Guys, how do you understand this term, natural selection?
It's like, so if you have like the genetic makeup that benefits you the most in your environment, like natural selection is on your side. But if you don't have them, then, you know, you're the one that lost natural selection, I guess.
Yes, can you give example? Natural selection?
I can't think of one on the top of my head, but like if you live in a cold climate and you're an animal that doesn't have like fur, I guess, to keep them warm, like natural selection is like you will die. So natural selection prefers the animals with fur.
Perfect. Can you like move a step forward in terms of fur? Like you say, like let's think about rabbits, right? That live in the north and they have fur, right? So rabbit with white fur versus rabbit with gray fur.
With white fur because they're able to blend into the environment better.
Yes, so survival, right? So
Yeah.
natural selection is all about
Survival.
yes, being able to survive and what else?
Adapt.
To survive and have Marius. You want to say something? So one step is to survive. Is it enough to survive in terms of natural selection? Is it?
Reproduce.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, yes. So survive and reproduce, right? And animals, sorry, not animals. Should say living organisms, they are pretty creative, right? In this sense. So like, I think, how you say Maite? Maite? How you say your name?
Maite.
Maite. Beautiful name. Yes. So Maite, she said, like, she's saying about environment, right? I think another very good example is about giraffes, right? So giraffes have very close relatives. Very close relative. I'm going to show you in a second. A relative is called a copy. Do they resemble giraffes to you? Do they look like giraffes?
Or zebra.
No, I just say like, just with a copy.
They kind of look like zebras.
It's a copy and giraffe comparison. They have a lot in common, right? So this is basically a good example of different environment. A copy, they could find food that, on the level of their heads. Giraffes, they had to reach for the food, right? Reach for the food. So basically over years, nobody knows exactly how many years did it take, but this is something that shows like evolution of giraffe. A copy is still there. They're still there. But they definitely have a common ancestor with the giraffes. the giraffes had advantage. Those who had long necks, they had an advantage. You have an advantage, you survive. You have an advantage, you have your offspring, right? And that's what evolution is about. And that's what Darwin actually wrote in his book and created a lot of stir. A lot of people didn't like his ideas at all, right? Especially about humans, but you see, he survived. So there's something about Tree of Life. As I said, Tree of Life means that evolution is not only about natural selection. It's not only about survival of the fetus and having offspring. Evolution is about the tree of life, trying to figure out when and how the split happened. Like, good question, when actually cats and dogs became two different species, right? They definitely shared common ancestor. The first mammals, that ancestor of all mammals, look like a rat, pretty much. And from that rat, you have a diversity of animals, right? And each branch basically represents a split from the common ancestor. Who was the common ancestor? Why it happened? Nobody knows for sure. This is it about evolution. As I said, we're gonna talk more. It's just an overview, just an introduction. Any questions? Okay. So the last part that we're gonna talk today is something that I'm sure you're familiar, is their scientific method, right? So science means to know. And if you are into science, what do you think? What do you think the most important thing in science?
I guess to know how life works.
Awesome. Good. To ask her, science starts with asking a
Question.
Exactly. So that's how science starts. I mean, it's not only about asking a question, it's definitely about digging into it. It's about analyzing. It's a lot of things, but I should say people who got into science, right, who went into research, they definitely had some questions in their mind, right? I can tell you that, for example, when I first came to the United States, right? My first job was at the Rockefeller University. You know, it's Rockefeller University. It's York Street, 65 in York Street. And it was in neuroscience department, and I worked there for a couple of years, and then I went to a company, pharmaceutical company, and on scientific board in the company was a Nobel Prize winner in neuroscience, Eric Kandel. And I remember I listened to his speech in one of the conventions, and he said his question was, for example, when you create a memory, what are like physiological changes that happen in their nervous system? Okay, so that's a question. And he dedicated his scientific life for answering this question, right? And he did a huge breakthrough, basically being the first scientist to show what happens in neurons when memories are created, okay? So scientific method, yes. Here, step number one. Step number one is inquiry, right? So you have a question, you dig into it, right? You make observation and you try to explain the phenomena, right? And to explain, you build something called hypothesis, right? And then you test it. So careful observation. And let me just stick to Condell's work just to explain to you what is about. Okay, so so for example, this lady, she did observation with chimpanzee, but in terms of Condell, if you want to you want to study physiological changes in a neuron, you need a good model, right? You need a tool. So, for example, in math, it's something different, right? You just operate with numbers. It's something different in computers. But if you go into biology, you need a good specimen, right? So he was lucky. Basically, finding the right tools. This is a huge part of success, humongous. Okay, and he was very lucky. He found that some snails, they have large neurons, very, very large, but you can examine them under the microscope, okay? So next step was to create memories. To create memories, you have to do what? What do you need to create memory?
Do things.
Experience things.
Close. Marius, what do you want to say?
I don't know, repetition. You my teachers say repetition creates a good form of remembering things.
Close. Come on, you're so close. Anyone else can say, to create memory, you have to, first thing you have to learn. Learn. Experience is something similar to learning, but you have to learn, right? So now, actually, let me find for you. Give me a second. Let me find for you. Come on. Aplysia. Aplysia is actually a name of the snail that Condell used. Yeah, so this is Condell, and this is his famous Aplysia. And let me just use this one. Nope, this one. Let's see well. Okay, can you see this one, guys? This is Aplysia, and he actually taught Aplysia to this called withdrawal reflex. We also have withdrawal reflex. Is actually to remove some part of it. But anyways, like he stressed this poor Aplysia to the point that I think she developed like reflex to associate touch with the shock, right? Basically, memory is association between two different things, right? So tactile stimulation, tail shock, right? So Aplysia learned that whenever something touches it, right, it gets shock. So it was actually hiding a certain part of it, but doesn't matter. He was able to create memory, right? So this is one neuron, this is another neuron, right? So what he learned, what he basically was able to show, that once you teach aplysia to respond to particular stimulation over time, do you see the difference? This is called neurotransmitter. This is called receptor. Can you see what happens between two cells? The connections between the cells get stronger. So this cell produces more neurotransmitter. This cell produces more receptors. And there are also some changes in the protein synthesis that take place, okay? So memory that for a very long time was considered something, you know, non-physiological, pretty much, okay? Non-physiological at all. For the first time, he was able to demonstrate, no, behind memory created, right? There is some changes in the cell behind, right? And his work actually definitely triggered a lot of additional research. All of interesting things that we know about memory in these days. How they created, how they change, and what actually memories are for on a large scale, okay? So inductive reasoning is actually when you apply information from research to something more specific, right? So for example, getting information aplysia who has giant neurons, next step was inductive reasoning, applying this information to much smaller neurons, right? That, for example, present in human brain. We don't have those large as aplysia has, right? So hypothesis. So hypothesis is an explanation. And in this case, explanation was that if memory is association, right? Association between different sorts of information. So this association is built between neurons, right? And this association gets stronger once, like the more information runs between them, the more time information runs, the stronger connections become, okay? And then experiment, something you conduct to actually prove your hypothesis, right? And deductive reasoning, yes, is basically general premise to make specific predictions. So how you can apply, again, your information to different fields. And the last thing actually I want to show you is this one, right? So this is like from memory, from aplysia to something very, very simple. So you see observation, desk lamp doesn't work, right? Question, why doesn't desk lamp work? Hypothesis number one, bulb is burnt out. Hypothesis number two, the bulb is not improperly screwed in. Prediction, replacing bulb will fix the problem. Prediction, reinstalling bulb will fix problem. Test of prediction, replace bulb, test, reinstall, result, lamp works. Hypothesis supported, result, desk lamp doesn't work, hypothesis is not supported. So that's what science is about, right? You ask question, you do research. Before you collect enough information to come up with a hypothesis, and then you have to test it. Now, if you prove your hypothesis, the most important thing that your results should be reproduced, right? Not only by you, but by other scientists, okay? So this is like something really, really crucial in biology, because quite often you get results, you publish them, only to later on be actually discouraged by the peers. I should say, like, I have experience in scientific field here. I work in 2 institutions. I work at Rockefeller University. I work in the Memorial Sloan Kettering Institute. I work in industry. I mean, industry definitely is better, but industry is something that one day you're good, one day the company is closed, right? But research, it's a lot. It's a world that, I should say, like Darwin, survival of the fittest, right? You should be smart, but you should be lucky. And you should have, I don't know, I should say yes, like lucky if your research is could be applied into industry, if your research can interest other research institutions, if you're able to develop good collaborations, if you're able to publish good papers, and if you get money. Because in science, in scientific world, money is all about if you're able to set up the lab, buy equipment, buy specimens, have technicians that work for you. My gosh, that's a lot. And another thing that I didn't really like about science, it really narrows you to your field. When I started teaching, I actually, I really expanded my horizons greatly. You know, having PhD in science, I think I learned so much more when I started teaching neuroscience. When I actually turned to other topics in neuroscience from what I've been to. When my field was memory, learning memory, I learned about so much about movement, how nervous system produces and controls the movement. I learned about vision. I learned about smell, taste, sensations, so many different things. And yeah, I say that this is something that I really enjoy. I enjoy teaching more than being a scientist. Okay, guys, who wants to do research? Tell me. Nice. What would you like to do research in, Leon? Unmute yourself. Yes. What?
Like, I don't know, like any, like I like to look at like diseases and figure out how they work and what makes sense. I want to do research on that kind of stuff. Like,
Okay. Nice. Who else?
I would like to do research on like how genetics affects like, conditions, like genetic conditions.
Like which one?
Like I forgot the name, MLS, MLS, something like that.
Okay. Who else wants to be a scientist and do research? Demarius, what kind of research would you like to do?
Probably genetics also. I find it really interesting how genetics play as a role for the basis of all living things. So genetic engineering, genetic